What's up, everyone? This is T. Jamal coming at you with another episode of ASAP, your Afrikan Social Activism Playbook. Joined as always by my beautiful co-host, Michelee. How you doing today, sis?
I'm pretty good today. I went to the park. I feel nice and refreshed. Ate a good lunch. So I'm feeling real good. How about you?
I'm doing all right. I just wanted to start this morning off with, our repeated message of demanding justice for Breonna Taylor and making sure that no, we have not forgotten. No, it is not over. No, we are not giving up. We are continuing to keep that pushing, and it is going to stay in our ticker down at the bottom, scrolling across the screen. And we're going to, acknowledge that situation as long as we need to, so that we let them know that we will not be silenced. So now to check in. So you've had a day before you, which is good. And my day is just starting. And I do intend on a lot of things on my plate today. I have so much to do, but I am pacing myself and, making sure that I take care of me as well as all of the things that I have assigned for myself and others have taxed me to do.
Right.
So, this is going to be a fun week, though, of ASAP, a very necessary week. This entire week is, thematic. It's really like I call the week a woman's worth. So we have volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4, and this is how you're going to see the episodes, pop up on YouTube. A Woman's Worth Volume 1 today, and we are, talking about women and their role in the movement, as well as just how male and female relationships within activism and advocacy have been, how they should be, and how we envision for them to continue. So we are going to start off with our straight truth, no chaser, and talk about a term that I've been seeing a lot lately, and that is intersectionality. So, Mish, tell us a little bit about what you know about intersectionality, and then I'll come up after you.
Right. Okay. So I'm thinking I will just read the definition. We'll get into it, into the personal understanding of it and everything. So intersectionality is defined as the interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, and gender as they apply to a given individual or group, regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. And so how basically, I came to learn about it and understand it is when you have multiple layers of oppression, right? Like, I think us as, as the Black community, we've experienced a lot of oppression, different forms of it, right? We have racism. And then in America, as we know, growing up there, we realize things like classism and, between poverty and everything. And so, as you can imagine, when we start to break down barriers, knock down different types of oppression, you will still have some people who will be oppressed, right? So if we take away racism, you will still have people who are suffering under, under other types of oppression. You have sexism and, ableism. You have all different, plethora of struggles that we're dealing with. And so when we look at intersectionality, coined by our highlight of the day, a special woman that we'll get to talk about. So yeah, I mean that's how basically I understand it. So I have to, when we having this conversation, there's a lot of like push and pull and like a lot of dismissing when some people start to speak up to just say, hey, don't forget about me, in this struggle. And we just have to just be just realize that other people are, there are other struggles within this struggle. What about you? How did you
Yeah.
come to learn about it?
I listen to a lot of podcasts. I watch a lot of YouTube videos, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
always just trying to be in tune with what's happening out in the ether, and of course on social media. And there's been this conversation about um, men and women in activism and the places of people and how we interact with one another. And
Right.
so intersectionality has been coming up with women explaining to people that not only do they deal with, racial politics and racial discrimination, but just them being a woman makes it another hurdle and barrier that they have to overcome. And it is, bringing that to the attention. I can definitely see how that being a Black woman
Mm-hmm.
is looked upon in a different way. I think we spoke about it before, but there are certain things where, Malcolm X said that, the Black woman is like the most unprotected, person in this country. And
Mm-hmm.
there are laws that were on the books. I know because I'm from Georgia, I'm from
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta, that in Georgia it was unthinkable that the rape of a Black woman could happen,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Because in the law, it was like if a Black woman is raped, it's not a crime, or it's not even considered rape because she supposedly always wants it, right? And
Right.
so just thinking about that, it's not the fact that she's just a woman, because okay, women are endangered from being, you know, sexually abused by men,
Mm-hmm.
but then being a Black woman put her at even more of a disadvantage because she can just be disregarded by the law. And
Mm-hmm.
in this land, it can be done in a way. And then there's nothing that, Black men can do to step in and and do anything about that situation. So it puts everybody in a horrible situation. So as a Black man, I have to be that much more aware in my consciousness about how our Black women are, what they are carrying and what those loads are, and what my role is in making sure that some of that is some of that burden isn't put on her by me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's both in all forms of relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially in our advocacy, because sometimes we often, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, sometimes we get so caught up in what's happening to us as a whole that we don't see each other as individuals, or we don't see each little segment of us. And we, and you've alluded to it almost every episode, but we've talked about what being a champion is, and it's not saying that it's wrong because it's happening to me, but it's
Right.
wrong because it's happening to anyone. And that, when I heard the term intersectionality, you have to check your own privilege, you have to check yourself and say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so what about this have I not seen? Or what about this have I not considered, previously? And,
Mm-hmm.
how do I digest this information in order to be able to utilize it and go forward with it? So just understanding that there are, and And the sex thing isn't the only type of intersectionality. There's you know, people who are not of the major religion, they get double of the discrimination, right? So if you're a black Muslim, you get double the discrimination. If you're a black person who practices, any type of traditional African spiritual ways, you get kind of, weird looks. And it may even come from black people, right? Because that intersection or that difference is what is being challenged. So it's the fact that you're black, so you get the greater outer discrimination, and then from within your own group or one of your groups, you can get even more discrimination or more isolation from other people finding like minimal differences in whether it's sex, sexuality, religion, and all these different types of things, political views. And so we just have to be aware about intersectionality, put it into our vocabulary, and make sure that we are considerate of everything that makes up a three-dimensional person, 360 degrees all the way around of a person, and be willing to, stand for and advocate with them in all of the things that they're going through. So,
Right. So,
go ahead.
okay. So yeah, just kind of touching back on, on a couple points, like you mentioned, when you were talking about being a black woman, all of the struggles that we'll have, struggles that we'll have on top of just being black, because we all black, right? If we're talking about the black community, the thing that we have in common is that we're all black. But when you're also living in this, in this patriarchal society, and it's a white male dominated society, right? And so if you are not white, you are, you know what I mean, you're facing some issues, of discrimination. If you are not male, right, you are going to face issues. If you are in this, you also have to consider, just what you said, you brought up religion, right? In America, Christianity is the dominant religion. And so as you spoke to, if you're something other than that, then you can face some types of other types of discrimination. When we talk about heterosexuality and homosexuality and everything in between, you will face, what I mean, with struggles like that. And I think it's important to note, we have this, there's a lot of pushback in my experience, as a black woman, with my peers, family members, people that I associate with, and have conversations with. There seems to be an issue. We cannot seem to address the actual issues because there's a lot of, there's misunderstanding from people who share some of these privileges, of the dominant society. A lot of black men do not understand, heterosexual black men, well, keep going. It's so many things to add on to it. Cisgender, heterosexual black men, a lot of times cannot understand how they are a part of the issue, how they can be a part of the problem, and they don't understand a lot of times how they can have privilege, because the first thing I'll hear is, well, I'm a black man, what privilege do I have, what advantage do I have in society, and the fact of the matter is, you do have privileges. We all have privileges. I have some. There are certain things that I wouldn't have to worry about, that someone, like, just for example, as a heterosexual black woman, there are, I don't have to worry about, will my marriage be accepted, or am I able to live freely and who I love. I don't have to worry about that in my day to day. Some people do. That's a struggle that I don't have. That's a privilege that I don't, that I possess, that some other people might not have. And so when I discuss intersectionality with people who haven't, probably haven't heard about it, or don't understand this idea of possessing privileges, when they are oppressed. You have to understand that even marginalized people can have privileges. You can still, continue to marginalize other people and oppress other people, even if you are a part of a marginalized group. So yeah,
And
that's mhm,
that's a larger theme of something that we're going to get into starting today, but is also
mhm,
going to carry out throughout the rest of this week as we stay on this a woman's worth theme. And
mhm,
intersectionality is an interesting term. A lot of people, I remember I put it into I was writing about it. I put it into Microsoft Word and it told me that I had misspelled it. And I was like, what's going on? I know I spelled this right. The word
mhm.
is a new word. So Microsoft Word
Yeah.
is just not familiar with it. And so we're going to, in our highlight reel today, talk about the woman who actually coined the term intersectionality. And that is Kimberly Williams Crenshaw. And so I'm going to, pass it to my sister to tell you guys a little bit more about Kim. And I will, you know, like we did in the first play, come
Yeah.
up and give my thoughts as well. But you start
Right.
us off.
Yeah, so Miss Kimberly Crenshaw, I appreciate her so much. Like you said, she did coin this term, 1989 actually. So it is a newer word, right? It wasn't something that we couldn't name it, we couldn't pinpoint. Doesn't mean it didn't exist, but we couldn't pinpoint it, name it, back in the
Mhm.
day. But so she's a lawyer, and she also studied race and racism and a lot of the civil rights and things. And so in studying this, she came up with this term, this theory, not just the term, but the theory, just explaining how different forms of oppression can, come across each other, further oppressing someone. So when we start to knock down some of the, different issues, then you'll still have other people who will be oppressed in a society. And so she actually founded at the Columbia Law Center. She has a program on intersectionality and policy studies. So, I mean, she's a scholar, a lawyer, just a people's champ. She is a person who, like we talk about being a champion, one person who is not only looking at her struggle, but if we're not free, none of us are free. If some of us are not free, none of us are. And so I think like even people, when we talk about intersectionality and get to discuss Kimberly Crenshaw, um, a lot of the people, a lot of leaders of today, like a lot of younger leaders, organizations have taken after, her lead. And you can see clearly in the Black Lives Matter movement where they are basically placing the most marginalized. When you read their about me section, and find out what they're about, and the founders of Black Lives Matter, these women, they made it a point to center the people who are the most oppressed in this whole conversation, so they do not get left out. Because as we are trying to move forward as a whole, you, like how we say, you as strong as your weakest link, or some, however that saying goes. But
Mhm. Yeah,
um
that's it.
but yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. Because time after time, like, this is not our first go around. We've been dealing with oppression and struggle, for a very long time. And crazy enough, this same type of oppression, in this one, in our lifetime, generations before us. So this is not a new struggle at all. But as scholars, you develop new theories. There's more studies done to just kind of define these things, and make it easier for us to break it down. And so she has done that.
So, like you said, the struggle is cyclical, and honestly, it's about time that we break that cycle, because this is one of the reasons that we do ASAP, and which is why I put it back on the screen so that you can see when we're talking about this social activism playbook. There are plays that have already been laid out. Again,
Mhm.
the path has already been The trail has already been blazed. We just let kudzu grow around it, and we don't always see that it's there. But
Yeah.
all we need now is a lawnmower. We don't even need like anybody to really excavate the land. It's been done.
Mhm.
Our ancestors have already been fighting this fight, and they have laid the groundwork for us. It is just our duty to make sure that those legacies don't die in vain, and that we don't forget the work that has already been done. It can be very discouraging if you feel like this is the first time that anybody
Absolutely.
is really addressing this in this way. So
Mhm.
a lot of this work is being built upon the shoulders of people who've done it already. So this program and the actual, physical, well, I don't know if it's going to be physical, but the digital social activism playbook is actually going to have the scenarios and how we address these things. So back to Kimberly Williams Crenshaw. She was doing a lot of things around 2014 when Trayvon Martin got killed. There was this initiative that was started called My Brother's Keeper, and then later in 2014, Barack Obama signed the initiative into law or passed an executive order. And she and a lot of other women felt like, okay, but we're forgetting about the girls. And what about the girls? What about the young Black girls who are being, just as oppressed? Because a lot of the times people see what's happening to Black boys, because
Yeah.
when you turn on the local news, it's my face that you see as a mugshot, or it's my
Right.
face that you see as the victim, right?
Hmm.
So either or, it's usually a Black man involved in some type of violence against another Black man, mostly. And we know what's going on with the violence and the gang culture and all of those things, and not having the opportunities and being pushed toward, you know, drug dealing and all those things. But we sometimes fail to mention, because it is less in your face.
Hmm.
It's not as loud as a gunshot, but the young girls that are being taken and are going missing, that are not being spoken of. The sex trafficking that is heavy. Like Atlanta is a hotbed for it. And when Black girls go missing, they don't get the same treatment as the John Benet Ramseys or whoever else names of little, missing white girls that we know, but they don't even get covered on the news. I was just walking into the gas station yesterday, and it just, you know, so happened that there was a sign on the door of a missing 13-year-old girl that I had
Mm.
never heard about. And if I had not been at that gas station, like, why did that story not make the news? Why do I not see her name trending on social media? What is going on there? Like, why
Hmm.
is that not important enough? And it's not like because we highlight her or highlight the sex trafficking situation that is taking away from what's happening, the injustices that are happening to Black men. And, it's not to diminish that, but I believe that more than one thing can happen at a time. And it all, like we were talking about with the people could have followed Du Bois and actually listened to Booker T. Washington. These things are not
Right.
mutually exclusive. If we're talking
Hmm.
about things that are happening in the Black community, a 13-year-old Black girl going missing is a big deal.
Hmm.
And the fact that we don't know what's going on there, or these stories happen just as often as the police killing us,
Hmm.
probably even more so, because they can be done in such silence. And we know, like, the issues that women have to deal with just not being able to walk down the street alone and not feel comfortable. especially not here in the US, because anything can happen. And so
Mhm.
we have to be diligent in making sure that everybody's issues are at the forefront, that these things are just as important. Um, and I see a lot of the conversations happening, and they're happening on social media, but sometimes the way that they happen is not in a productive way, which is why we have this show to model how to have a conversation, how to bring it up,
Yep.
and and how to talk to one another.
Right.
I've
And
known
so,
Michelee since like 2010, and
mhm.
we talk to one another, like an actual conversation, an actual back and forth dialogue where I actually listen to and respect what she has to say and her points. And I feel the same of what she does for me. So it's just so much that we need to learn how to communicate with one another. But go ahead and finish your point.
Yeah, I was just gonna just continue on what you were saying before, just add something in there. When we talk about the images that we're shown in the media of like what's happening to who, and even when we're still on the topic of police brutality, Black and brown women are also being brutalized by police officers, and trans people are still dying in in at the hands of police and anyone else, and our crimes are not being solved. Trans people's crimes are not being solved. We have to look at the entire community. And that is like at this moment, we are seeing a lot of people. It's just like, I've had enough. That's why, we see all of these conversations going on right now. And I think some of these different, um, some of these different points, these intersections and stuff that we're crossing, it makes some people uncomfortable when we talk and we see that every single time when we bring up, like I heard a few months ago in this conversation of Black Lives Matter, all Black Lives Matter came up, right? Because when we have these movements, traditionally a lot of people are left out. We tend to focus and we see who are the leaders, who is perceived to be the leaders of these movements, of the organizations, and who's at the forefront. We do focus on Black men. Are we saying that to focus on other people as well? Are we saying forget about Black men, or take the spotlight off Black? We're saying we are all, as a family, as a community, we have to have all of our needs addressed. We have to have, and we're facing the same like this a struggle. I think a lot of people like to separate. When I saw that conversation, I had that conversation with friends on all Black Lives Matter. Some people really had a problem with it, and I was trying to explain, well, check your privilege. You know what I mean? Like you're used to being represented. You when we look at the list of names, like the hashtag names, it's majority Black men who we are seeing. Does that mean is only or majority Black men being killed by police? No. When we talk about the prison industrial system, we're talking about that whole system, and we have to like look at the information. The Black and brown women are actually like one of the highest growing population going into the prisons right now, and these are things we don't even consider when we talk about the prison industrial system. We're thinking of only Black men, or majority, you know what I mean, as they're the victims of this only, so we don't even get to look at and anyone else being under the same type of oppression and doing in the same struggles. We're not even able to look at other people who are also suffering. And so all we're saying is, especially now, a lot of people are just, we're tired of being left out, and we're saying we're not really getting anywhere because we knocked down one struggle, we're still going to have these. And I think even most importantly, a lot of times people in our community who we're all fighting together, right? A lot of the people in our community are doing the are some of the oppressors of these other marginalized groups. So even when we talk about sexism. It's not sexism. Most of us, you know, as Black women, most of us are experiencing sexism by our own men, by men in our own community. We're not talking about just what the white man is doing to us or what non-Black men are doing to us. And so I think a lot of times we like to separate ourselves when we talk about the struggles of trans people and, you know, and people in the LGBTQ movement in that group. We like to separate ourselves and say, well, I don't do that. I'm not a part of that. That doesn't concern me. It does concern us. I know several people. I know, like, it may be behaviors, you know, that I participated in, or you know, just discussions, or, you know, we like to, I think, passively just we like to pass on these issues when we feel like, you know, because no one wants to be called out. No one wants to be called a predator. No one wants to be called an oppressor. When we call out, you know, issues on racism, most white people, and they could be your neighbor, a coworker, whatever, we see how riled up they get. Is I'm not racist. No one wants to be called racist. No one wants to be called sexist. No one wants to be called homophobic. So who is at fault? You know what I mean? How can you, even if you are not one who is like personally attacking someone, like firsthandly attacking someone, maybe there are things that you have done, you know, or things that you witness that you don't call out, that is, you know what I mean, it's still promoting the oppression of some people. It's like you're not helping with the struggle. And especially when we're talking about Black issues, we are all a community. We can't act like these things don't happen. We can't act like, you know, sexism is not a thing, you know, misogyny and all of these things. There is even a term misogynoir because, you know, just as a Black woman, and, you know, the intersection of being a Black woman and being a Black and being a woman, you know what I mean? And these are things that we're experiencing in our own homes, in our own communities. So it's not like you can just separate yourself and say, well, it's not me. We all are a part of it.
So to piggyback off your point, and I wanted to just make sure that when we're talking about Kimberly Williams Crenshaw, this is current present day activism. So the highlight reel isn't always going to be so far back in the past. We're still building upon work of what people are doing right now. And we need to know what people are doing in the moment. But your point moved us on into our Monday morning quarterback, which is trickle down oppression. And what does that mean? So just like trickle down economics, where it doesn't really exist because we know that economics actually goes against gravity, where it starts at the bottom and goes and feeds all the people at the top. But trickle down oppression is a thing where there was this, you know, this saying that people say Black men get oppressed at work. You know, he gets beat out in the field. He comes home, beat the wife beats the children kick the dog. And it's just trickle down oppression all the way to the children. And then the pets suffer in the end, right? And so everybody is feeling like, okay, I can't actually go after the person who is oppressing me. So I'm going to put somebody under me. And that's the same idea of neo-colonization of what we spoke about last week. That's how that idea gets festered, right? It's not the power structure that you end up fighting against. It's just you want to keep the power structure. You just want to be in power.
Yes.
And so we have to make sure that we tear down that mentality. So when it comes to men and women in the household, men and women in the movement, men and women in this long Black freedom struggle, so we talked about being in a patriarchal society. So the way that this society is set up, it's a European patriarchal society. So the white man, who is the grand oppressor, is going to project onto everybody else their views of how social activities work.
Right.
So in turn, the white man's primary focus is going to be dismantling the family, and the way that they see as dismantling the family is by displacing the black man,
Mm-hmm.
getting rid of the father, or killing off the men, or weakening the men in whatever way. So not understanding that in a lot of, African societies, women had just as much responsibility and, strength as the men did, in different forms, as all women do. But in Africa, we were able to actually acknowledge it. So when they took a lot of the men out of households through a lot of these systems, the family structure didn't just fall all the way apart, right? We talk about needing more fathers in the home, but even during enslavement, when men died and all the different things got sold off, families were still able to find the strength to stick around. And I believe that is built in women, because just if you look at the world, the way men are designed, we are designed to protect. So we go off to war, we go out
Right.
to hunt. That was our traditional roles. And if you died on the hunt or you died at war, the whole family didn't just break down and crumble. So the
Mhm.
women have always been built with that strength to carry on that load in the absence of a man. With him there, it soups up that power and that ability to be that much more free and to develop that much faster. But
Mhm.
understanding that men are being attacked in that way, that we not only feel like we're on the front lines, also end up in our proximity to white men constantly attacking us as black men. We end up unintentionally adopting their ways of thinking.
Mhm.
So we see how they treat their women, so we do the same thing to ours. We think that the model of manhood is what they are presenting,
Right.
and their model of manhood is extra macho,
Yeah.
extra oppressive, and making sure that they are the only voice and they are the only ones that have the controlling vote. And
Mhm.
it's just by virtue of us being in this society and not really having roots and a strong connection to where we come from, because we've lost the significance of a lot of the things that we do, we
Mhm.
we find that imbalance. And so you can see, even in our best of intentions, like we end up being oppressors ourselves. And most of the time, it as black men, it comes down in the form, or by the victims being our women, whether that be physical abuse, mental abuse, verbal abuse, or just keeping them out of feeling significant in certain things, in the aspects of the movement. Or we find out, okay, this is the woman's role, and this is the only place that you will be accepted in this
Right.
fight. Um,
Mhm.
I read a long time ago, and I was very shocked, because as a student, as somebody who saw myself as, conscious and very inspired by the works in the civil rights movement as well as the Black Power movement, when I heard like women speak out who were a part of the Black Panther Party for self-defense, and they were talking about the misogyny that they endured, you know, inside of the organization, from
For
the leaders
sure.
of the organization, from the men who they were looking for to be partners with, it kind of threw me back a little bit, because I just wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
Um, I figured, like, it's funny how consciousness doesn't cover everything. You don't become conscious
Yeah.
in everything all at once.
Yes.
You become conscious of what's happening to you, and still be unconscious of what's happening to
Ex-
other people, as well as how
Exactly.
you may be a part of what's happening to other people. Go
Right,
ahead.
right. That's the whole thing. Like even, especially when when it was first brought to my attention, first when I first noticed it, I started noticing it and questioning it before I even, learned the term or, just really just dove into it. And so I think it's crazy. Like anybody from Ella Baker to who people who we've already discussed, and I started to mention it then, but I was like, we're gonna have a whole conversation on this later. But like people from Ella Baker, as you already mentioned her experience there, even to Shirley Chisholm, and she was saying even during her struggle, she was saying that as a Black woman, her struggle she more so felt discriminated against because of from sexism than racism. And it was interesting. She was saying that the people who she felt would be um, less likely to vote for her would be Black men and white women, which was very interesting to me, and I mean, this is the experience a lot of times. And I think um there's an idea that Black women are given privilege. Like from conversations that I've personally been involved in or I've witnessed, a lot of people, and these are people who consider themselves to be conscious or whatever, tend to feel that somehow, because you have Black women in a lot of leadership roles now where we weren't seen before, we're the most educated group, very successful, growing businesses and all kinds of things, right? Where we're in leadership roles and just establishing ourselves in society. And for some reason, a lot of people feel that we were given a privilege, like we're just given passes, or like, no, we're overcoming these struggles on our own, like without the help, and sometimes without the help of people in our own communities. So I think that's important to note, like, there's not a special treatment. And when you look at like how other people observe intersectionality, I was reading a lot of things, on the far left and the far right of it, on the far left, you'll have a lot of people, the conservatives idea of what intersectionality is like they tend to think that it's special privileges given to minorities, given to these people, like, why are they special? Why do they get special treatment? And it's like, you haven't realized that you've had the privilege all this time. You don't think it's important to share with some people. You don't think it's important for some people to get, to experience that type of equality. And that's the thing about it, is that, and that's why you see us going so hard, especially now, because when is it going to end? And I think also like these male chauvinist ideas, things that we've been raised on. We've seen it in our households a lot of time, and that's what, mom and daddy did. That's what granddad did, and it's been passed on to us. So that's why we still see it now. I am seeing a lot more of my peers just like kind of redefining their own lives, and standards and traditions, because we're seeing how we were affected so negatively by these old ideas. Just what you were talking about with this whole macho idea, toxic masculinity is the term, right? We get so hung up on this that we can't even really discuss the issues that we're facing, because people are caught up. What do you mean? There's no such thing as toxic masculinity, and a lot of people feel like that it's an attack on their manhood, and it's not at all. It's literally just saying these ideas, what you've been taught about being a man, like, the boys don't cry, and I've seen, we a lot of us have witnessed, and some of us, a lot of men have experienced, like, being told that you can't cry, or being hit, or punished for being soft. You know what I mean? Like, that's harmful for you. You should be able to express your emotions. You're supposed to be able to express when you're experiencing pain or joy and not be considered weak. This whole idea of handling women, dealing with women, it's just toxic. It's harming you sometimes even more than other people who you come across. You want to
That's
say
true.
something?
Yeah, because there's a balance there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can't, as a man, there is certain expectations that's placed on you by society and even by our women. So
Mm-hmm.
it's there is a I do believe that toxic masculinity exists, but every form of masculinity isn't toxic, right?
Yeah, of
So
course.
I think that sometimes, right, but which is why we are having this conversation, and we're having it in a way to model how to have the conversation, because I think that sometimes everything just get painted with this broad brush, and we don't bring nuance to the conversation, right? So just like we
Hmm.
talked about last week, where nuance was our word of the day on Friday, where
Hmm.
these conversations can't be nuanced over social media,
Right.
because there's only so many characters that you can input into a tweet at a time, and
Hmm.
you got to do 50 tweets just to get one point
Right.
across, and by
Right.
then you're already responding to other people's response to the first tweet, and you've been taken off your original point. There's only
Yeah.
so much information you can put in a meme on Instagram, right? And
Yeah.
so, and nobody's about to read an essay on Facebook even though
Exactly.
you have the space to do it. So
Right.
there
Very
has to
few.
be a way for us to have these conversations in a meaningful way, but also not in an echo chamber. So I
Yeah.
wanted to address some things that you were talking about. So as a
Hmm.
Black man, I see a lot of things happening in corporate America, for example. And I've talked to Black women, and I've had a conversation with some Black women that said they realized that at their job, not only were there not a lot of Black people, but
Hmm.
they limited the elevation of Black men, or even, Black men would come in qualified and they would not hire them.
Hmm.
And it was like there was a hiring freeze on Black men that was, unofficial. But there were Black women that worked in the company, even though it was, a small amount of them. And so I was asking, so you saw hiring practices favoring hiring Black women over Black men? And she had to think about it and say, yes. Because, like I said, it goes back to that patriarchal thing where white men are looking at the Black family like, if I displace the man, then I throw off the balance of everything. And also, I can create tension within themselves by elevating the woman over the man, where she's bringing in the money. And a lot of the times we're talking about a woman's worth, right? This entire week. But at the same time, we aren't really giving in our adolescence and in our youth what a man's value is beyond being a provider,
Hmm.
beyond being just a tool who is, strong. Okay, I need him here to open up this jar of pickles, or I need him here
Yeah.
to reach the top of the refrigerator.
Right.
And if we're not
Fix
bringing
this.
in, the money, how does a man, especially a Black man, where does he find his value within the home? Where does he find
Hmm.
his value within society if he feels like, okay, everybody is shutting me out?
Yeah.
And so there is something there, and
Hmm.
there is and the thing that I feel like what happens is these conversations, sometimes they happen in echo chambers, and then they come out to the public, where women
Hmm.
are with women talking about what they are going through. Men are with men talking about what we are going through. And
Hmm.
then the only time we talk to one another is when we are talking at one another. Like, I'm
Hmm.
okay. Now I've come out of my chamber, my echo chamber of men reinforcing my thoughts and my victimhood. And then a Black woman leaves her echo chamber of thoughts reinforcing her, you know, oppression and victimhood. And now they're looking at each other as opposition, not as partners. And so sometimes it's the way that these conversations begin.
Hmm.
They don't begin in a nuanced way. They don't begin as a conversation. They begin as, I saw this meme, and they misquoted Angela Davis, and I wanted to bring it up on the screen, but I couldn't find a version that I could like copy, but it was on somebody's Instagram post. And it
Okay.
was saying that Black men and white women will always be the weakest link in the fight for equality, so on and so forth. And they quoted it as an Angela Davis quote. even though Angela Davis never said this, because
Yeah.
I looked it up because I was like, okay, I was a little disappointed because I was like, dang, they siding us up with white women and they just making this blanket statement like black men will always be the weakest in the fight for equality. And I'm like, so they're just wiping away all the
Well,
other things
with
that,
the white
you know,
women,
people
with
have done.
white women, not alone, but
Yes,
with white women.
which is even worse.
But
Right?
this is the thing though, is like you have to because I do somewhat agree with that. Like not the weakest link, not
Mhm.
verbatim, but the idea that when we talk about oppression, and I'll just speak to, just take it back to like the women's suffrage movement, right? And
Mhm.
Black women very quickly understood that the white women that they were marching alongside amongst um they weren't for them. They didn't want us there, and so we realized we had to eat in the issue of in feminism, right? Because what is feminism? We're talking about the equality, you know what I mean, of women. And that's still an issue for us as women. We still have issues as women. We're not, you know what I mean, just given a pass because we're black, or it's not irrelevant just because we're black. That's one struggle, but then we have
Right.
another struggle to add on to that. And so we quickly realized that we were not a part of that. And so you see, womanism, but then I think it's an interesting thing that happens. And I think it's important to also note, as we're talking about, we'll bring up toxic masculinity and things like that. And realize that women can also be, can be enforcing these things and teaching these things and internalizing these things. So a lot of times we'll do these things to ourselves. You know what I mean? As far as, being sexist, women can be sexist towards other women and ideas of themselves. So it's not just something that only men have done, but it's so deeply ingrained in our, in our socialization and how we learn, like from our parents. If our parents grew up with that idea, with those ideas, most likely we are going to carry those same ideas. It can be harmful to us. It can be, and that's why I'm a person who loves to break down traditions. I am not just going to stick with the same traditions that our parents and their parents and so on and so forth have carried on. Not every single thing, because a lot of times it was for survival in that moment. A lot of times we can
Mhm.
grow out of certain situations. This is the more nuance, like that word nuance is coming up. This situation, the environment that we are in now is different than back in the day. When we talk about bringing home the bacon, a lot of women are bringing home the bacon right now. And with a lot of, I wanted to touch on that whole independent woman thing, because I see this come up a lot, the independent woman trope. And a lot of men feel that it's an attack, or like, that's an excuse for women not being protected, or saying, well, she's an independent woman, so I don't need to protect her. She don't need nobody to protect her. She can do this and that all on her own. And it's like, why did you think about how she had to develop that mentality? Why does she have to be independent? Do you think that we just, come out of the womb just like, oh, I don't need no man, I don't want no? No, it was out of survival. And because we have been used to having to carry all of those responsibilities, that's how that comes about. And the ideas, when we think about the male chauvinist ideas of, a woman belongs in the kitchen and barefoot and pregnant, and woman's role is not, leading it, when we talk about those movements in the past and even present, and people, women not being accepted as leaders, because women are not supposed to be out, seen out in the front, and they lead from the back, or whatever, they're silent. This is when this idea, when these things become enforced, and we have to say, no, I am capable of being a leader. There are people who are natural born leaders, male or female. That does not matter. Like, this idea of what masculinity is, like each of us, every one of us has feminine and masculine qualities. That does not have to be negative. No woman is all feminine. No man is all masculine. We all share, both. And I think we have to accept it, even in relationships. when we talk about, well, one person is dominating, you can have a woman that has a more dominant personality than a man. That doesn't make her more manly. That doesn't make her man less manly, and so we have to be comfortable with this and understand it. And so some of those old traditions are harmful to us because they didn't understand that then, or maybe there was a different situation that called for, like when you talk about going to war and stuff like that. Now that's not even an excuse, because we have plenty of women in the army, plenty of women that's out there fighting when some men aren't. So that's not even an excuse now, because we are capable. And I think the problem that we run into is people not wanting to let go of those old ideas, because maybe they feel like it's a power that they hold. And this is my theory on how we get to toxic masculinity. I mean, it's not just my theory. It's been talked about, but like when we talk about toxic masculinity again, I think about it as like a lot of, black and brown men. We're talking about, in our case, black men have had their power and their authority and everything stripped away from them, right? We were side by side during enslavement. It wasn't that black women weren't in the field too, but I can understand how, as a man, and you're talking about how your position in society is, you're supposed to be the provider and the protector and this and that was stripped away. And so I think now in today's society, and even before today, but in more modern times, when you are no longer enslaved and now you have a bit of freedom, you have autonomy, and I think it's been like just a grab for power. What can I get for myself? I think it's a lot of black and brown men trying to redefine their masculinity, trying to redefine their manhood, and so you go with the most extreme of these masculine traits. You know what I mean? To be dominant, I have to dominate you. That means you have to be down in the ground. You bow down to me. That is not what a leader. That's not what that's not that feature of, like, dominance. You don't have to be harming someone for you to be, a leader. And I think that's the harmful thing, because when you talk about a lot of other things with showing emotions and stuff, I understand you don't want to look vulnerable. You don't want to be vulnerable. And so I can understand in some cases, like when you have to go fight, you can't just be like, oh, I'm scared. In that type of situation, yes, you do tuck that part away, because when you're facing your opponent.
That's why I don't think it is completely toxic. I think there is a way to train young men or boys to become men. There's a way that you have to train girls to become women. It's when those ideas get to be extreme. Like you said, there is like, men just biologically have an X and a Y chromosome.
Right.
And you know what I mean? So we are already, men and women both have testosterone and estrogen. They naturally are in our systems. We have both hormones. Men just have more testosterone than estrogen. So even those hormones tie to the way our brain functions, those chemical reactions bounce off of each other that come outward in the way that we act. So that's science. That's biology.
Right. Even in your anatomy and stuff, things like that is the difference.
Right. And those things, they balance themselves out. But in the outward society, when you're talking about men scratching and scraping, especially black men scratching and scraping for any type of validation of their manhood. So a black man can't grow up crying, because that when you go out there, you have to prepare them for the reality of what's to happen. So, and we aren't usually as men as verbal. We don't talk to each other in that way. Now it can develop, and that's what I'm talking about with the socialization, with the kind of, it's a healthy balance that needs to be there. Like we said, nuance. And for those of you who still don't understand quite what nuance means, just think of the Meek Mill song, "It's Levels to This," right? There are levels to all of these different facets of what we're talking about. So as a man, my father made sure that I didn't just walk around whining, because as a child you whine a lot. You
Yeah.
whine to get what you want. That is
Right.
not going to get you anywhere as a man. As a
Yeah.
grown man, if you're whining at me, you're gonna get hit in the face or just get disregarded. Right? And so, but does that work for adult women? Does whining work for women, like a grown woman? Not all the time, but it can. As a grown man, it doesn't. So I'm not saying that it's something that should just be accepted, but I'm just saying in preparation for your survival, certain things have to be taught out of you. And I don't think that I think it becomes toxic when you put it in a steel box, right? That is immovable and not flexible. But if you create certain parameters, if you create a standard doesn't mean that it's not flexible. It's just letting you know, okay, these are things that you will need to do. These are the
Yeah.
ways that you're going to have to be. Like if you are the father and you hear a noise rumbling, your wife shouldn't be the first one to pop up. Now, it's not to say that she can't be, right beside you, but you better be the one that, secures your home and make sure all the doors are locked, and make sure that
Yeah.
if you hear something, you should be the lightest sleeper in your house, right?
Yeah.
Because that is still there. And it goes even to what's acceptable in dating, in the mating process. Is it acceptable? Does a man complain if the woman he's looking to marry is still living with her parents? Does a man get shamed for living with his parents beyond a certain age? And by women, by their own standards.
I don't know. Okay? So I'll just say it's a
I'm not
little
talking about
fuzzy.
2020. I'm
No,
not
no,
talking
no.
about
I know.
Generation Y. I'm talking
Yeah.
about
Of course, of
in
course.
general.
But
If
this
a
is the
man
thing.
doesn't have a if a
Go
man doesn't
ahead.
have a car, if he's never paid his own bills, do you think that a woman will feel comfortable marrying that man?
Let me tell you, it happens all the
I
time.
I, I
And
know that.
I'm not only talking about 20. I'm not only talking about this
No,
generation.
no. I
I'm
know
talking
that.
about. Yeah, I mean, but so this is the thing. I think we've also been very forgiving, very understanding of the Black man's plight. Like, even a lot of women, we will put our own issues aside to say, my man is hurting, my son is hurting, that's the thing about it. And that's why I feel, and a lot of us feel, that these movements to go far, to get us where we need to go, do need to be led by more women, because we are able to understand other people's struggle, even sometimes putting our own aside. Like, it's like it's more selfless. And we have to look at the turnout at protests, at, you know what I mean, at whatever type of struggle. Who is always on the front line for everybody, right? And you cannot deny that. We are not going to sit up here and play, you know what I mean? Like, we are always there. And so, because we are, and I think because we birthed you, whether if it doesn't have to be romantic, you are our fathers, sons, romantic partners, and whoever else. And so we do have that, and already knowing, like, from that motherly, from that woman sense, is like having that more nurturing type, vibe about us. Like, that is our natural, that's what we do, right? So we do feel obligated to protect you all. And so when we come across these conversations, like, especially like when you can look at a lot of these modern conversations, modern situations, and current situations, I meant, like with Megan Thee Stallion being shot, and people saying, well, she didn't, she wasn't so big. They're looking at her stature, because she's a tall woman, you know what I mean, because she raps confidently, well, because she's a rapper, which is seen to be more more masculine, sport, we'll say. And then because she's confident, and so oh, because you can handle it. You're an independent woman. You can buy yourself this and that. Why you need to be protected? And that's literally what we've been seeing. And so I don't know how
So
many. I've seen more women. I've seen less women state we feel unprotected by our men. I've seen that more than I've seen women. I've seen more of that than I have seen people not say it, and that's sad. And I think when we get to those points, we need to listen. You need to reflect
I've
instead
seen
of
that as
being
well.
defensive.
And I've seen the sentiments from men that
Mhm.
need to be checked. And I find myself in constant debates with men. So, like I said, I'm not saying that toxic masculinity does not exist. Sometimes, though, there's no nuance to the conversation, and there is a broad brush painted over all masculinity. Any form of just a heteronormal normative structure of a man is looked at as problematic, and it's not always problematic. There is space for those people, and the thing is, it doesn't help that argument when you have the idiots out there, because most, like me, right, most of the people that I know that are the men who are being there for their families, the men who are showing the healthy level of masculinity, they're not the ones on social media berating the women.
Hmm.
We're just, we move.
We'll see. We're gonna talk about it. Go ahead.
What,
Finish.
what
You
I'm
can
saying is, the people who are actually doing the work and who are
finish.
saying, who are actually modeling that image,
Yeah.
our voices aren't loud on social media. Most of the time when you see social media, it's a lot of loud minorities.
Yeah.
It's a loud, minuscule amount of people who they're just on there all the time. And a lot
I
of
feel
them don't have any type of real world experiences. And so they don't know how to articulate themselves. They get these debates, they call people all types of things. And it's on both sides, right? So
yeah,
even when
yeah.
you see these memes floating around from women that are just dismissing men altogether, it's probably younger people who just have time to be on social media. The people who are working are at work. They're usually like, I don't have all time unless I was in, the last time I had time to spend all day on Facebook was like 2007. And I was a sophomore in college. And that was like maybe like the fourth year of Facebook. But
Mhm.
otherwise, if you're out actually doing the work, you'll post on there to talk about the stuff that you're doing. But you're not just on there going back and forth in the comment section of a post, because
Mm.
you, as a sensible person, realize that me going back and forth with whoever this is with an egg as their as their as their face, like they don't even have their face, it's not their real name. You arguing with the sky. And it's
Yeah.
like the old adage says, don't argue with the fool, because from far away, nobody can tell the difference. You
Yeah.
don't know which one is the fool from far away. So I'm
Yeah.
not in the comment section going back and forth with people just saying things that don't make sense. I
Yeah.
will ask somebody who posts something, did you cite your sources? Where did you get this information from? Can I get the original source so I can check it
Yeah.
out? And I could read the whole thing in context. It's another thing
Mhm.
that we don't do. We don't read for context.
I agree with that.
We don't
Oof.
read what came before and what came afterwards. So,
Yeah.
I mean, my whole point was, I see and understand the challenges, right? And we
Mhm.
both agree, because Ella Baker is my favorite activist. She
Mhm.
got into arguments all the time with Dr. King about
Mhm.
being that leader centric. When he came to town, it had to be his way. And she was
Right.
like, there's a better way of doing this. The better way is to actually go to the people and have the people understand that if there are multiple leaders and everybody has that capacity, this thing can last that much longer. Because once that
Right.
leader dies, or once that leader goes away or lose steam or gets discredited or
Yeah.
whatever happens, everything that they ever touched or did, especially in the event that they get discredited, ends up being um invalid. Even the good that they did, right? you can't even speak of it anymore because
Mm-hmm.
they've been invalidated completely.
Right.
The worst
Right.
thing that can happen to a leader is to be left alive and then have your legacy tarnished.
Right.
When they kill you, you become a martyr and your legacy lives on forever.
Yeah.
But my whole point was just saying that there needs to be nuance to the conversation. And the reason that I wanted to have this with you is because we come from this from different angles. You
Yeah.
are going to see your side, right? And not only that, you're going to hear more just on your feed, just by you being a Black woman. Your news feed on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook is going to look slightly different from mine, just by virtue of me being a Black male and the people that I follow and even the topics that I'm going to follow. So I'm going to see, because I am very into sports and all these things, I'm going to see what the boxers are saying. I'm going to see what the basketball players are saying. I'm going to see what the athletes are saying. I'm going to see what the male rappers are saying because I'm following them. I'll have some female artists and some female activists on my timeline as I get introduced to them, but you will probably be first introduced to them. And I may have even found some people by virtue of people like you and my other close female friends, right?
Right.
So I listen to you guys, but just by virtue of my news feed, it is going to seem like an echo chamber of things that agree with my perspective just because of my interests. So you search your interest on Google and on the internet, and then we all know social media is fishing out every piece of data that we search.
Yeah.
So they're going to present more things that cater to our interests even when we are on social media. So the same thing happens to both parties. I think the mistake that we make is when we speak out at one another without having a conversation with one another. There is no time in adolescence where they have. So we know that they split us up in adolescence to talk about puberty. They split us up. The boys go with the women. I mean, the boys go with the men. The girls go with the women. They talk about the changes that are happening in your body and all these things. They never say, boys, this is how girls communicate. Girls, this is how boys communicate.
Yes.
Let's have a voice set and talk to one another.
Can we develop a curriculum like that? Can we develop a new curriculum? Because that is absolutely what needs to happen. I think, but even when we think about education, right? Because a lot of times when we talk about, what we weren't taught and things that we, don't learn in school, a lot of these things need to be established in the household, even from children. And so that's why it's so important. We have so many broken homes. And how is that detrimental to our youth? They don't get to see effective communication between mom and dad, or mom and mom, dad and dad, whoever, whatever your household looks like. We don't get to see effective communication. That's who we should be modeling after. I know that as a child, I didn't grow up with both my parents in the home, and my parents had me very young, and so it's things that they wouldn't even know, how to communicate and things, and while they're all trying to figure out this parenting thing. But I've always had my father in my life, even though I didn't live with them. I always saw him, and we have a great relationship. But just, I realized that in my adulthood, that when I was a child, the friends that I got, my best friends growing up, they all came from households where you had mom and dad and you had siblings, and because that's something that I longed for. And I didn't realize that until I became an adult, until after 30. And I'm like, this is why I gravitate towards certain things. This is why I behave the way that I do, like in relationships, realizing, just reflecting on what my thoughts were, what transpired in those different situations. And just add on top of that, they have their own problems too. Other people, my partners, are allowed to have their own issues. So, you got double the fun. But while I'm trying to figure it out, I'm like, it's so many things that were affected by an incomplete household. Then you have people who, even if they had both parents, some people, grew up with dysfunctional families, and so still the communication is broken, so that's not like a one, fix all, solution. But I think it's important for us to make sure we establish that, make sure we at least have that around them. So even mentors, aunts and uncles, whoever you are, neighbors, we have to pay attention to our children, realize what our children need, because we're going to grow up. All we're going to be is adults with childlike behaviors.
And that's what I see all the time on social media. This back and forth reminds me so much of middle school. And I'm not even going to say high school. It's middle school behavior. It's nah, 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 nah. I said this, or you did this. He said, she said, with nobody actually understanding how to digest information and actually have a dialogue. Just like that meme that I saw that said, oh man, Black men and white women will always be the weakest link in the fight for equality. And I'm like, so what about all of the, and because it's just like a pendulum. The pendulum swings to one extreme to the next extreme. So now we go from women not being equally represented to men being, and especially straight Black men being the problem. And all of them are, and their existence is the problem. And that's why a lot of people get in their feelings, because they are communicating over social media. And then one person is coming from one extreme and then painting this generalized brush, but there is no nuanced conversation. There's no actual dialogue. These people don't know each other. They don't have any type of relationship. And with chastisement without relationship will always go wrong.
Yeah.
Now that I can say absolute.
So I wonder though, because I've made it a mission of mine to, especially during these times, we're all riled up about, getting liberation and really overcoming and stuff. And you see other people, even a lot of non-Black people, was making this movement even more powerful and progressive, is because we have the participation of a lot more non-Black people. It's not just us yelling about what's going on. And, now people are seeing it and they're joining the fight with us. So now is the perfect time to bring up, a lot of times what we experience when we bring up our issues, with sexism or, whatever inside of our community, a lot of our Black men feel that, well, we're being divisive because now we're bringing this up and we want to divide the family. No, we need to address it now, because a lot of times when we're having a conversation, when a lot of white people don't feel like, well, because I'm not racist, I don't have anything to do with this. A lot of men feel like, well, because I don't rape women, I don't have anything to do with women's abuse. And then you get to victim blame. You get to pointing at, well, it's just the bad decisions you made. First of all, we like to scapegoat. We like to use our brothers and sisters who are in the projects or in the hood, use them as a scapegoat to say, hey, that's them, not me. It's a lot of educated, career-driven men and women who participate in some of this same toxic behavior. It is not just them. We're not going to do that to them, because I know a lot of brothers and sisters from the hood in the projects who are excellent fathers and mothers. We are not going to do that to them. So this conversation, it does need to be had over and over, because I think the biggest problem is focusing so much on the generalization. And that's why I would even challenge you, like, and I know you and I talk to you, and you are one of the most understanding men that I know, and able to understand, once it's broken down to you. And a lot of times you figured it out on your own, but we get caught up on just the brush stroke. And it's like, if you are not a part of that problem, or if you see people around you exhibiting this behavior or these ideas, it is also your responsibility. When we talk about the men who disrespect women and call women out their names and and all this stuff, and abuse, put their hands on women, they all have friends, family. Who's going to check them? They already don't respect women, clearly, by their actions. They don't respect women. So women talking to them, telling them what the problem is not going to be effective. Who do they need? They need other men to check them.
Exactly.
That's what needs to happen. So we need to hear each other and not just focus on the broad paint, paint stroke.
No, but
because I think we don't get riled up on that.
I agree with you on that last point that you made about, we need, just like we need in the fight for the Black freedom struggle, we need allies who are non-Black, because they can enter rooms that we can't, and talk to people who will be unwilling to listen to us. As Black men, we have to take on the responsibility and accountability to check those who are in the wrong, which is why I continue to say, like I keep prefacing my statement by saying, toxic masculinity, those things exist. I know them. I see them. I personally check people around me who exhibit them. I want to put together something like a campaign where we as men, we hold each other accountable. But I also want to make sure that I put it out there, because there's like there's nuance to this. You cannot chastise people unless you have a relationship with them. They're always going to take it as an attack. They don't know you. They don't know what your intentions are. You have not shown them that you love them and that it's coming out of a place of concern. Because a lot of the times, because the posts are not nuanced, they aren't a real conversation, because you are already, by the time you tweet, by the time you make the post, you're already at peed off level.
Yeah,
so
you
you're
already feel
tweeting
some
out
type
of
of way.
emotion. So it is coming out as a I'm talking at, right? So I'm going to receive it that way. And
I
it's
think,
like, okay, so what's going on? And I'm not saying I as me personally. I'm saying I as a man generally looking at that. I'm like, well, that's disappointing. Me, I'm going to look at it and say, that's disappointing. Where, like I saw the meme that was, misquoting Angela Davis. So I said, let me go find out what book or what speech that was in. I wanted to hear her say it, and I wanted to hear what context she was saying it in. Couldn't find it anywhere. Saw a whole Twitter thread about it, and in like message 30 of the thread, I spent my time trying to research this, and they actually had Angela Davis's book where nothing like that was said. Right? And they said, this is not her. If you want to say something, just say it in your own words. Don't use somebody else. Right?
But that's meme history 101. That's what happened.
But that's the issue though. So what happens is but look, but the terms, the absolute terms of always and all are the issues.
I don't think
I've witnessed, they have to be controlled.
When I've witnessed it,
so
or when I've
my point is,
okay, maybe I think we're off. I think we're off, but go ahead. Finish.
No, you're good. You froze up a little bit, but you're still good. I can still hear you. But
go ahead.
And you're back now. But what I was saying was, when we use those absolute terms, that's what gets people in their feelings, and people don't know how to respond to those things. So when we use absolutes like always and all and never, even in your communication, just in the people that you never do this. That's rarely true. So you can have a better communication even with your significant other with taking those words out. I can hear the message of what you're saying a lot better, especially if I don't have a relationship with you. I can receive it a little better, because even as me, like I've been sitting here this whole time saying I know dysfunctional Black men, and I challenge them and I check them, and they get on my nerves, which is why I don't have that many male friends to begin with. Like if you see me, I have a bunch of sisters and I have a few male friends because I only have room for that energy. Right. And so I understand it. I'm not oblivious to it or saying that it doesn't exist. I'm just saying there's a better way to have the conversation, because we need to converse, because we're both coming from our echo chambers. Back in the day, before social media, before you could tweet in anger, when you were about to call somebody, or you were about to beep somebody, or you were writing a letter to somebody, you made edits before you sent. Now you can tweet something real quick, hit send, and now it's up there forever because somebody can screenshot it. And even though it was done out of emotion, this is not your intended message, because is it really progressive? Is talking back and forth at one another, even if it's the way you feel, how is it advancing the conversation? I'm all
Mm-hmm.
about results and solutions. Is your raw emotion, your unfiltered attack or
Mm-hmm.
thought, is it going to advance the conversation? The
Mm-hmm.
result that I want, because what I was saying was, it's cases like the reason that the black community was so mad at Jussie Smollett is because those things happen to people.
Yeah.
So if you do it as a hoax, the other side is going to use it
Right. They won't believe
against us
anybody
when
else.
it's real. The
Mm-hmm.
same thing when people are on Twitter misquoting people. So now you're going to have the toxic men say, "Oh, they just lied right there. That didn't come from Angela Davis."
I agree.
It's setting back the actual reality that these things
Yeah.
happen. So we can't
Yeah.
be just spreading false information. We have
I
to be
totally, I
careful and
totally agree.
intentional.
I totally
So
agree
we
with
have
that.
to we got to be careful and intentional about what we write, about what we post, and how we speak to each other. Because I, being as understanding as I am, and I had to learn to be this person. I had to
Yeah.
learn that arguing with this person, because I used to get in arguments with black people all the time over the fact that we need to still be talking about black issues. And
Right.
black people got comfortable, especially
Right.
under Obama, because of the symbolic of having a black person in office. But even a little bit before Obama, I was getting into heated debates in 2004, 2005, 2006. And at a point, I had to question myself, was like, I'm exhausting myself having these
Right.
conversations, and I'm not getting anywhere. Some people you got
Yeah.
to leave. Like
I totally agree.
I can plant the seed with you, but I might not be the one to water it.
Right.
Somebody else might water it. And if you come back around and you have the good information later and it didn't come from, and you didn't listen to me initially, I don't care if you got it from me,
Right.
so long
Right.
as you got it. But I can't waste
Right.
my time sitting with you this whole time going back and forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is a way, because you know me, right? So just see me. What the problem is, just like the problem with white people and black people, is they'll see an intelligent black person and they'll just assume that that intelligent black person is the exception and not the rule.
Mm. Yep.
The same thing with positive images of masculine, heteronormative, cisgendered, whatever black men. If you see that image, if you are so caught up in your echo chamber, you will box me in as the exception and not the rule, automatically dissing the fact that there may be other people who are like me. And I think that that's where we have to focus on when we talk about that critical mass. You're not going to reach the masses all at once. Just like what we talking about with the bus boycott. It's about 15 people in that church when they decided to do it. Right. And so, but it became not only a citywide movement, but it became a national influence. The same
Mm-hmm.
thing in the male-female relationships. We, as the black men who have taken it upon ourselves to actually be conscious and check our privilege, we need to talk to black women, have real conversations, talk about developing that curriculum that you were talking about, right? But also make sure that we don't just say it needs to be, we need to look out for the youth, because we also have to do something about these grown people walking around being toxic, still managing to mess things up right now. So
Yeah.
my suggestion is that those of us who are level enough to have a conversation and a dialogue, stop wasting time on those who aren't ready to hear it yet. Right?
Yeah.
Not saying to
Yeah.
stop posting it. Post sensible information. If trolls are in your comment section, just don't respond to them right now,
Right.
because that is not,
Right.
there's going to be a waste of your energy and a waste of your time. Focus your energy on the people who respond positively. If you see one
Mm-hmm.
positive post in there, you'd be like, okay, let me enter a dialogue with that person, or let me see where this person stands, or let me talk to the fathers that I do see in their children's lives, or let me see the men that I do standing up on behalf of women. Let me build with them and see what we can do. And then challenge them, charge us as the men who claim to be the good men, just the same way we do with the police. If there are good police, they should be challenging the police who are doing bad. If there are good men, they should be challenging. So the thing is, though, talk to us and challenge us. So if you feel like the trolls or the toxic men won't listen to you, tell us to do it.
So let me
and
ask you.
If we don't, then we lied, right? Then we aren't what we said we are. Right. But give us the opportunity to do it.
Right. Okay, so this is something that I personally do because I came to that conclusion. I'm not the type, I'm not about to go argue with some random, dude, and like the ones who are just straight ignorant, just belligerent, and they make it a point to troll people. I'm not wasting my time on them, right? Those days are long gone. But who I do associate with, like I was saying before, a lot of times we like to put it off on just, on a certain type of person, or these people just ignorant, period. I'm like, my audience, I guess I say, like people who I chose to be friends with on my social media or whatever platform I'm having these conversations, these are men, and it's been very surprising that a lot of men close to me who I thought something of are the least likely to they've been the most resistant to these conversations, and people who and I still think they're good men. It's just this information isn't penetrating. They are not able to understand. It's from that, and I make sure to not come off, especially I might post something, post because it's a general idea or something that I thought about. And a lot of times, like I can give like a couple paragraphs or something. And so, who reads it, but I'm expressing my thoughts in something. But people read it and feel like I don't do like a all or all y'all or something like that. Because I personally haven't had many experiences. I've had some, but not many experiences with, the type of people who do this like type of attacking. But it's still, even though I'm not a victim of it all the time, I'm speaking on behalf of those who are, because it's an everyday struggle, right? And so when I'm talking about this stuff, a lot of men who are supposed to be, good men, these are people who are resistant to this information. And so the people who I thought would be more like, like what you said is, challenging this. I've been literally in conversations where being called out of my name, or witness other women being called out of their name for speaking on a certain thing, or calling out this toxic behavior, and the other men who claim to be good men are not checking them. None of that happens. And I'm not saying everything has to be on social media, but like even when I would ask people personally, because especially if it's someone that I know, I'll go to the inbox or call them up or text them, or, be like, can we talk? Like how I did with you when this whole idea, what was it? It was something we were talking about. It was with I think the All Black Lives Matter thing. And because I was very surprised with a lot of the men that I consider good men and very understanding, I thought that they would be the ones to understand, but they were some of the most resistant ones. And I literally called up individually, or had Zoom meetings, or Facebook Messenger or something, had these conversations with them to get their understanding and try to share perspective. And some people were completely cut off to the idea. They didn't want to even explore it because they're like, oh, this doesn't exist, it's not real. And I want to make it a point to note that when we discuss toxic masculinity, it is not attacking your masculinity or your manhood. We're saying the idea, maybe you need to reconsider the idea of what you consider a man. What do you consider masculine? And be able to define that on your own. I think there are other factors like, the pressure from society. Some men, you might be worried about your boys calling you out for some, or your dad or something. We're gonna get in this on this deconstructed. I mean, because it was something in there that I saw. So we're gonna talk about it, but it's just the pressure from outsiders. Even when you're trying to change tradition, I get the same thing as a woman. I have untraditional values, and things that I'm forming my life around. And some women will be like, girl, what? And so we just have to be, we can't be afraid and trying to, um, just redefine things for ourselves. What is healthy for us? We should be able to do that.
We can't be afraid to check each other either. And that's,
Yeah.
but that's my point when I say that there needs to be a unisex dialogue, right? I want it
Mm-hmm.
to start in adolescence or pre-adolescence when we start to have those conversations within
Mm-hmm.
puberty, because women communicate differently from men. The first time
Absolutely.
we usually find these things out is when we enter romantic relationships with one another. And then it's like, what is she talking about? It's like, what is
We
he
in
saying?
butted heads.
Yeah, we've already gotten into the argument by that time. But then sometimes it's too late. And then you
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like maneuver your way. And even as you balance yourself through those situations, let's say you're in a healthy long marriage, you
Yeah.
still don't have any type of institutionalized lessons that have it where you can go to some source to find out what's going on.
Yep.
A
Yep.
young man, a young man is always told to have male mentors. I have
Yeah.
many woman mentors. I've had, and she actually tried to like push me off on some men, and I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's cool, but I like talking to you.
Right. Right.
And so that, I think there are girls that need, you know, of course, we know they need male influence in the life, whether it comes from the father or uncles or whoever may be around. But there needs to be programs where, there is, boys understand the authority that women can have and understand what it
Mm-hmm.
feels like to have an authoritative figure as a woman. So having a
Right.
female mentor,
Yeah.
understanding the dynamics of that, and that it doesn't take anything away from you as a man to have a woman as an authority figure. There is no
Mm-hmm.
model of it though.
Right.
And
Right.
because there's no model, you can't blame people for not understanding how to function.
Right.
Now, you can hold people accountable, because just
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't know this was against the law don't mean you're not going to jail for it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's not a wipe away excuse. It's just a
Yeah.
place of coming to empathize with, okay, I understand how you got there, but let's walk that back and get you
Yes.
somewhere else. Because
Yes.
even as a man, when I'm having conversations with other men, I just can't come out and challenge, because me stepping to a man is already an aggressive act.
Mm-hmm.
It's the
Yep.
aggressive act from the get-go. So there's a polished way to have that conversation and a way to introduce it, because men, we already are like on guard. So
Yeah.
when you say something, if the response is an attack, or it's taken as a, they get defensive, that's just because how we're wired, first of just from the beginning. So understanding that can get people to a place to understand, okay, how do I get the results that I want? The results that I
Right.
want is to get the man to understand what I'm saying and to understand it as valid, to take the
Right.
point and digest it. So if I have to change the way that I present the information, then I have to do that. Me as a man, understanding how women communicate, I need to understand that, like my wife told me early in our marriage, and it doesn't even come from a place of, her dealing with past relationships. It's just like her uncle communicates by yelling at people and she hates it.
Mm.
So she told me early, I don't like yelling. So
Right.
don't yell. So my
Right.
tone of voice changes when I talk to her. Even
See?
when we have a disagreement, it has to change because I've considered how she feels, and but she told it to me in a way that I could, okay, I understand. So I know
Bro.
now going forward not to do that.
So this is what happens though. Like that's effective communication. And that wasn't just in a romantic, that wasn't just in a romantic relationship in your adulthood, or You learn this early on. That is conditioning. That's programming. So now you're learning. She's communicating her feelings and her, like, how she's going to process that yelling. If that occurs, she's letting you know how it's going to affect her, and letting you know what her reaction might be, right? If she feels that your voice elevating, it might feel hostile to her because that was her experience. We don't do this. We don't learn this a lot of times. Even, and I don't want to put like all the blame on just, just a lot of parents feel attacked, especially right now. I was just having a conversation where it was like, someone with traditional ideas of parenting, and like, you just do what I say, and really, when we don't respect children, that seems to be the normal thing. A lot of parents don't actually respect their children, don't talk to them. All they probably knew was to get, you know what I mean, like that physical punishment was their way of learning. Everyone does not learn that way. You know what I mean? And so this nuance, we talk about nuance again. We have to figure out how to parent again, because everyone does not receive those messages the same. It would have been very effective to, especially when we get into like chosen relationships, someone that I'm choosing to be with, like my significant other,
Right.
come to the table and let me know what your triggers are. Let me know how to communicate with you, because we're going to butt heads so much because now you want to like cover it up and act like some things don't phase you, but then it's just going to be boiling under your skin, and then all of a sudden you're going to blow up on me. We have to
The
learn
thing
to
is,
communicate.
people don't know their own triggers a lot of the time.
Yeah, true that too.
They don't even know that they exist. They just know, I don't like the way I feel when this happens, but they don't even know how to articulate that. They just respond in the way that they're feeling. So a lot of the times it comes down to the fact that we don't even know how to articulate our own triggers. We don't know the word triggers. We don't think in that way. So a lot of the times you got to know yourself.
That idea is new.
A lot of people don't know themselves. They haven't spent enough time just with themselves, because we learn, okay, I got to get a girlfriend, I got to get a boyfriend to feel like I'm doing something in middle and high school. So you don't even take that time while you are like, your body is growing into who you're going to be, to actually learn who you are, because you're trying to fit in so much to the standard of what everybody else has set. You're trying to fit into what the school has set as what's cool. You're trying to fit in what's going to get you a girlfriend. You're trying to fit into the standard of what's going to get you a boyfriend. And so you don't even know who you are. You know who you are based on what you appear to be, or what you make yourself be around other people. Is even more so with Black people, because I talk about it all the time, where when I'm walking down the street, I have to act a certain way in front of Black men so as not to be tried, so that they don't think that I'm some type of mark or target or soft. So I got to present my way in a certain way around them. Then I have to present my way to Black women a certain way, a little bit softer, but still not soft, because they, especially coming from where I come from, they also too will see you as a mark, right? Then I have to wait. Okay, how do I have to tone that all the way down when I'm interacting with the police, or I see them coming, because they may see me as a threat. White people, white women. So I'm changing my dynamic and taking on and taking off masks as I walk down the street in the entire day, right? Black women have to do the same thing. Understanding that we both are like putting on these airs on and off. I don't know who I am.
Yeah.
Right.
That is so true.
So
we don't learn to do that. Yeah. We don't even learn that process.
And it just happens. So all of this goes into this trickle down oppression, because every day I walk outside, I feel like I have to be somebody else but me, so much so I don't know who I am. Black women are doing the same thing. We come into the house both feeling oppressed from outside pressures, and then it's just like a battle between one another. Right. But men and women aren't opposed to each other. But the way we learn it in Western society, we hear about the battle of the sexes, men versus women. Girls do this better, boys do this better. Throughout
Yeah.
school, you hear, oh, boys are better at math, but girls are just generally smarter. And so that they breed this competition in you even from elementary school. Oh, the girls are going to do this, or the girls, they mature a lot faster. They grow a lot faster. They do this more than boys, and y'all just slow. And then the girls get the big head, and then they start talking down to the boys. The boys in turn will outgrow them by high school. And then it turns into, okay, you were saying this back then. Now I'm putting it back on you. And it just goes back and forth. It's not a healthy dialogue. Even the way we learn, it's very unhealthy. And that comes from the adults around us. It comes from our socialism. It comes from outside sources. But we have to, again, control our own narrative. So if we want to really do that, we have to be able to realize how all these things fit into one another, realize the nuances of it. So just to finish the point of all these things, and we'll get into the deconstructed, which will take us back up as well. We need to understand the realities of intersectionality and how all that plays into what we're doing. Kimberly Williams Crenshaw is putting it on the forefront from the past and currently of all the different facets that we need to focus on. Just like I was talking about, the little girl whose picture was on the gas station door but didn't make the local news. Those issues have to be on the forefront, and it doesn't have to be one bigging up. You don't have to step on my neck to lift yourself up. Right. And I don't have to step over your problem to make sure that the issues that I'm dealing with are having the spotlight. There has to be ways that we converse with one another in a healthy way. So I think that puts us into our deconstructed for today, because everything is still thematically synced. So I was just so happened to be watching Moesha because it came on Netflix, because Netflix bought all these black shows. They bought Moesha, Sister, Girlfriends, a lot of these shows. So Moesha was the first one to get on. So I was like, let me go back and watch like the first few episodes. So I get to episode 5, and it's called Million Boy March. And like there was this group at her church, and they started a group, but it was like young leaders of the youth or something like that was the name of it. And it had nothing in there.
Council of
Leadership
Concerned Youth.
Council of Concerned Youth. Nowhere in there does it say boys or men only. But when Moesha went to the meeting, she realized that it was all men, and they had created this club to only talk about male issues and develop men into leaders, or the young boys into leaders. And Moesha came in to challenge and had very valid ideas, and was actually had a better sense of how to organize and construct these things and get things done more so than the boys did. But they were challenging her at every move, telling her that she shouldn't be there and there was no space for her. And she was saying, women have to be a part of this as well, especially when it's so general, leadership youth council. But it was that type of mentality that, even though it was presented in a situational comedy, it's comedic most of the time because it's true to life, because we see these things happen, right? And so I liked how they were addressing it in a way to bring that conversation up. And it's just sad that that episode of Moesha probably aired in like 1995 or 96 or something.
It was so
and we
long
still
ago.
have to have this conversation today.
Yep.
Because it's not enough to have it one time, which is why we dedicated this entire week to different facets of this conversation. But you watched episode 2. What did you take from it?
I mean, boy, it's just as we've been speaking to it, like even discussing real life situations outside of Hollywood, like, it made me think back to how, the women were feeling in during the civil rights movement, during the Black Power movement, And this idea, just as we discussed a little earlier in this episode, about these male chauvinist ideas of where a woman's place is, and it limits the roles that women can play. Women can be leaders as well. She had, like you said, very valid points. She was very productive in a short amount of time, that she had been able to join, because she had to get voted in, because he was like, no women at all. This for boys only. And it was just crazy. But then you also saw, how they always brought it back home too. So this is her in the outside world. And then at home, you got mom showing Miles, the little brother, how to do laundry and how to cook
Right.
and how to do other chores. And dad comes in and he's like, what? These are his formative years. You don't need to be teaching him all this. And she like, this is exactly the time I need to be teaching him this. So he can grow, be a whole adult, so he can be a whole man, and not be depending on a woman or whoever to do it for him. And that was just so crazy to me, just seeing like just that the concern that the father showed of like, you can't teach my son how to fold clothes, you can't teach my son how to cook, those are not things that young boys should be doing. And it was just crazy, because that's the real life, like you said. It's funny because it rings true, like in our everyday lives. And we see, especially growing up, if we have brothers and sisters and stuff, a lot of people talk about their responsibilities as, like young girls have way more responsibility in the household from growing up, than their male, than their brothers, or males
Yep.
that they grow up with. And that's just such a crazy idea, to not think that when they grow up, both of them have to grow up. The boys have to grow up, the girls have to grow up. And what's going to happen? Who are you going to have? You're still going to raise these people, are still going to be raised with the ideas of like, this is what, I'm supposed to do this, and he or she's supposed to do this. And so that's why people are confused when we get older, and it's like, well, you already done said, well, this is a masculine thing, so I can't do that. This is a feminine thing, so I can't be a part of that. And we don't understand like how even to
And
function
that's
in relationships, hand off, different responsibilities, because I have this idea of who you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to do.
that's when it becomes toxic, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you teach a boy to handle himself and conduct himself in a certain way, or you teach a girl to handle herself or conduct herself in a certain way. Is when
Mm-hmm.
you start to put external limits on even
Mm-hmm.
the activities that they can do, right?
Toys to play
Everybody
with.
in everybody in the house needs to know how to cook, especially if the standard and the expectation is that a man will eventually leave the house and venture off alone, and all he knows how to do is eat TV dinners. If you know what I mean, he's gonna be set up for failure. Doesn't even know how to survive basic survival tools. Even if you go back, like, that was a part of the the passing of the torch, or the
Mm-hmm.
training that young men went through. They call it I don't know why the term is rites of passage. That was
Yeah.
part of rites of passage programs, right? Learning how to fend for yourself and take care of yourself, for both boys and girls, men and
Yeah.
women, because
Yep.
the expectation is that you're supposed to come into the relationships as two complete people.
Yes.
And that's the problem, when
Yep.
that's how we get into those toxic relationships, because it's not two complete people. Like the terms "you complete me." No,
Yeah.
that should not be
Right.
the case. You should complete
That is
yourself, and then that
dangerous.
person is an addition, right? So when you come as two halves and you try to make a whole with two different people, it doesn't work like that. You have to be
Yep.
two whole people to create that balance and balance each other off with your own ideas, and you respect hers, she respects yours, and back and forth like that. So
Yep.
it was just funny that this episode, and I just happened to be watching this episode, and I was like, oh, we definitely got to talk about that this week, because
Right.
that is exactly along the lines of what we're talking about. And it's just, we need our media. First of all, we need to pay attention to when our media is actually giving us positive messages and not
Mm-hmm.
only focusing on those things that are negative or the things that we don't like.
Right.
I made a joke of like, we tend to always focus on the things that we don't like. It's like going to a restaurant, taking the menu, telling them all the things that you don't like and giving the
Right.
menu back.
Right.
But
That's so funny.
and then be mad when you don't get served any food. You didn't tell me what you wanted. Like, we are so used to talking about what we don't want or what we don't like or what we hate or what we disagree with. Say more about what we do want. And that's another thing, back to the, even that conversation about how social media, how we engage. How about we talk about list the expectations. As a woman, these are my expectations of, a real advocate in a black man. And then I can take that list and know what to do. These are the things that I expect. These are the things that we want to see from you. And then, that comes off a little bit better than these are what you're not doing.
Oh, you just made me think of something. You just made me think of something, because I think it changes, and especially like when we look at time and circumstances. We look at how we always talk about like incarceration rates, and how even in our households there are a lot of missing parents. It's the we have a lot of, we'll just say, overwhelmingly missing fathers in the home, right? So that's going to affect the people within that household. And so I think just the scarcity, just not being able to have all of these things, like someone who can provide and protect. A lot of times, like, those standards get cut down more and more and more, because like, how many options do I don't have that many options. And I've heard this from a lot of people. And so when the situation turns out to where you're getting somebody less desirable, and then you got other people, at the end of the day, well, you just made the wrong decision. And it's like, well, what other what other choices are we really getting out here? And not to say that there are no good men, because that's false. Like, I personally know a lot of good men, and I think it's difficult though, because there is scarcity. I think um there are more challenges that present itself, just given the current time. Even when you think about how a lot of our black men were shipped off to the war, like way back in the days, our grandfathers and great grandfathers and stuff like that. And looking at how their women had to be the breadwinners. And then you get drugs and prison and all of these different things that have affected our families. So people have had to, scrape again, to piece together whatever they could, because this life still had to go on. These children are already born. We still have to raise these children. And so they did whatever they could with what they had. And we still look at them and like still want to point a finger, but not considering all the other factors that affected those situations. We can't, like, I think it's important, like, we can't keep throwing up this idea of like on the defense of, well, all these women want to be independent women. Why did they have to be in that position? If the women had to be the breadwinners, they had to be the ones to protect and provide for their children and their own, their household. How are you criticizing them? You should be like, oh, let me let me see who, if I could take some responsibility off this sister's hands. You know what I mean? That's what should be happening. It should be people scrambling, even if you already have your own family, maybe make it a mission. Maybe some of y'all, the good men, look out for the women, and, for those households who you see have a missing father, and try to mentor those children, try to be there to provide for, and you know what I mean, and help her out, because we know what is most likely to come out of those situations. You're gonna have you're gonna have broken people. You have broken home. It's a good chance you're gonna have broken people. You're gonna have someone that wasn't there who was supposed to teach certain lessons. We need to increase like that mentorship. We need to increase that village mentality of, okay, this brother might not be in this house for whatever reason. It might have been done wrong. It might have been, convicted of a crime or something and put away for a long time. Might have chosen to not be there. Might have passed away. Like whatever the situation may be. If we had that village mentality, we would be looking out for our neighbor instead of criticizing them for doing what they could do with what they had. That's what needs to happen. If we really want to see progress, we have to make sure that we're not just criticizing, not just looking to point a finger and say, well, see, it's black women fault for raising them kids on their own. Or it's like, well, what could you have done? How could you have helped that situation so that she's not doing it on her own? Because just imagine, we talked about police last week, or the week before, and we were talking about all the responsibilities that policemen have. Like now they got to rescue the cats off the tree. They got to, go do all these different things. And so frustration grows. You imagine, and I know a lot of us, have witnessed single parents being very stressed out because they have to carry everything. That's not supposed to be a one-person job. Our family should be involved, but then let alone it's only one person taking care of all of that.
A two-person job. Honestly.
That's what I said. It's a family thing. You're supposed to have a family to depend on, that village to depend on, but we're not even doing that. A lot of times we just speculating. We just pointing the finger. So we can't blame anyone but ourselves if we do not pick up this responsibility. And you might be preoccupied, you might have a family of your own, you might have a job and other things that you want to do. But if we're really talking about moving us forward, we're going to have to sacrifice some of those things, some of those leisure hours, and actually step up and mentor, intentionally educating and looking out for, providing for those who don't have, for whatever reason they don't have.
That's one of the things that we try to push, especially with like the Bringing the Neighbor Back to the Hood campaign, is all about getting people to understand that there is time to be involved in the greater community. We just have to look at where we are wasting our time. Like if you take an hour away from watching Real Housewives or whatever it is that people watch now, or Power or Empire, take that hour, reinvest it in going to an hour-long community meeting. Take that hour and be at the PTA meeting. Take that hour and be at an event that's held in the community to do something. And if everybody takes just an hour or two, it doesn't have to be you taking up your entire day or your entire month to be involved. You can be involved at your level of availability.
Right.
But really assess what your availability is. Don't just look at, okay, work, school, and then rest. Some of those rest hours, or even some of those hours that you're spending out doing other things, can be reinvested. And if you do it now, in the long run, you'll have more time to chill because it'll be less issues to deal with. And so it's just, like you said, we have to be proactive. We have to be intentional. We have to take initiative, and we just have to be more involved. So I wanted to move us on to our For the Culture, and like the way that I've been presenting this whole day is counsel culture over cancel culture. And I've said this a lot of times on this show, but I wanted to highlight it today because in this conversation in particular, I see a lot of like possible cancellations of people, of things. And it's, do we want to get rid of the people, or do we want to change those people and educate them and get them to the place where they can be of assistance? Like I quoted that under 3000 verse, I'm welling on you traitors. Like, you might hate me now, I'ma still dap you anyway. I'll pray for you. I'm willing for my traitors. Like, because we might need you in this war. We might need you. At some point, We're going to need more people to be advocates for everything that we're pushing for.
Yep.
Black women, you need black men. Black men, we need black women. We need one another. We're not in competition with each other.
Mm-hmm.
We're not in competition with each other in romantic relationships. We're not in competition with one another platonically in business. We're not in competition with one another in the workforce. We're not competing against, and even if they try to pit us against each other, that just means we need more businesses owned and operated by us so that we
We
don't
have the
allow anybody
control.
else to dictate what the hiring process is, and
Yep.
then, trying to pit us against each other. I
Yep.
will not allow that narrative to continue. We have to change it ourselves. So, in the event of counsel culture taking over this cancel culture, what does counsel mean? Counsel means to speak with people, to speak life into people, to teach somebody the ways that they are doing. Like I said, as an example, instead of telling black men all the things that they're not doing and how unsatisfied you are, show them all the things that would satisfy you. Tell me
Mm.
what you want off the menu. Don't tell me all the things that you don't want off the menu, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know how to serve you just by knowing
Right.
what you don't want.
Right.
But I can serve you just like my wife told me. I don't like yelling. So now I do everything. My voice is already elevated. So
Yeah.
even then, I have to be very conscious about, okay, let me lower my voice. Let me change my tone when I'm
Yeah.
talking to her, especially when we're having a discussion that could possibly turn into a disagreement. Let me
Yeah.
be very intentional about how we are going to address this. The same thing needs to happen in all forms of relationships. And a
Exactly.
relationship is just anytime two people are interacting with one another for an extended period of
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't have to turn into anything, other than that. If I'm going to work with you, I need to be in relationship with you. That means I need to be able to have effective communication with you. I need to let you know what my expectations are going to be out of this interaction, and I need to know what your expectations are.
Yeah.
Right? So I think we need to focus more on promoting what we want and not so much what we don't want. Because if I tell you that I want a blue ribbon, I already told you I don't want a red one.
Yeah.
So I don't have to say I don't want a red ribbon.
Right.
Because if I just say I don't want a red ribbon, you might bring me a green one when I wanted a blue one.
Right. Just tell me
It
what
doesn't,
you want.
like, just tell me what you want. Tell
We
me what we can do, and
boy,
then we can get so much further.
it's so many different layers to this because like you talked about earlier about the communication and how we as men and women communicate so differently. What I was telling you earlier, how I read the book Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus, and it changed my life because like I said, a lot of times when we don't come from those households where that is being openly discussed, because that conversation, like, it surprises me, even you saying like how your mother sat you down and told you how to communicate with her, at least you know how not to communicate with her because it's going to garner a certain reaction from her. It might, you know what I mean, she doesn't like it, and so don't do it. When we don't grow up with those boundaries, or we don't enter relationships establishing those boundaries, we are left to figure it out on our own. And now, like, you know, you were talking about how we don't learn a lot of these things about communication until we're in a relationship. I say until we have failed relationships, and probably multiple, because we have, it's like a trial and error thing, you know. And it's just crazy because, yeah, I mean, that's literally what it comes down to, is I'm just gonna have to figure this out on my own. And like, you know, I might have messed up about 10 relationships by the time I'm like, okay, now I see what to do, you know. But even still, then you have to communicate with your partner. Who are you dealing with, and how to communicate with them effectively, and how to have them communicate with you. And is I think about with how what I learned about from that book and stuff is literally exactly how we communicate. Like you said, men communicate with other men, women communicate with other women, and we can kind of read each other. We know, you know, we can say a lot of stuff without actually saying stuff. And so when we get into a relationship, I feel that I should be able to tell, you know, say something by my body language, by my expressions, by my whatever, and you should be able to pick up on that, which I think we can sometimes like just figure, you can develop that. That's what I'm saying. It could be a learned thing where it's like, okay, instead of me having to say I'm hungry, you could be like, oh man, oh, what's over there? What we got in there? You know what? No, I'm hungry. Okay, she's hungry. It's time to find her something to eat. She's hungry. And then we need to figure that out though.
It even gets developed between the women, but the thing is, you spend so much time with them that you don't even realize that you're learning that behavior. Just like men, I know how to not get in a fight with a man.
Yes.
Because I know what actions that I take when I want to fight a man. I know what's going to spark that, right? I know if I get this close or if I say this is going to elicit that type of reaction. But that's learned behavior from, first of all, from understanding what's going to make me attack. And then also from experience. So, you know, it can be learned between men and women. And it takes just a little bit more effort because I don't experience the same things myself. Whereas with a man, I know how to communicate in a way where I believe, okay, this will make them listen to me, because there's a certain way to step to another guy that their guard will come down, because you're like, okay, they don't mean me any harm. They just talking, right? Because you'll see dudes will be in heated. If I talk to somebody from New Orleans and we just happen to talk about football, people from the outside will think we're about to come to blows with each other, right? But it's just excited. Like a LeBron versus Michael Jordan debate can get heated. And at no point are these two people going to fight each other. It's just how we communicate with one another. I could talk about this person from the top of their head to the bottom of their shoes and just dismantle them. And it's all jokes. Because we know how we communicate. Now, if I do that exact same thing to a woman, I'm in trouble, right? Because unless she grew up in that culture and was
like I can join right along
friends, but that's not a general thing that I'm just gonna do when I'm talking to women, right? And I'm also not going to water first. And I'm not also going to engage in a conversation where I take my sports talk bravado and talk to a woman that way. Because it's going to be seen as extra aggressive and crazy, right? So that same type of checking the way that I act, I have to change it a little bit when I'm talking to a woman. Whether I'm in a relationship with her, not even if I'm joking, there's a different way that I joke with my female friends than my male friends. It's just different. And understanding that different doesn't mean inequality. Different just means different. It's the same level of respect. It's the same, all of that. It's the same value that I have in those relationships. It's just understanding that we're coming from two different frameworks, two different mindsets. But that doesn't mean that we can't work together. Most of the times it means that we can accomplish so much more, because what you are strong in, it will probably patch up areas where I'm not. And where I'm elevated, it will probably raise you up to things that you hadn't considered. And that's why those things balance off of one another. So it's always about having that balance, always about appreciating the differences. That's why I don't like people who say I'm colorblind. Well, that just means that you don't accept what I am then. So I'm so different that I'm acceptable. So you want to normalize everything to your standard. When you say you're colorblind, you're normalizing everything to one standard, and it's yours. Because you're taking away everything that's different about me, when what you should be doing is appreciating it. You know what I mean? So
And
those
it
are the
goes
things
back.
that I believe. Go ahead.
No, it goes back to even what we were talking about when on this conversation on this topic of intersectionality and stuff. And it's not good enough to just say, well, we just black people. This is just a black movement. No, because a trans black person has a different experience than a cis hetero black man or black woman. We have different issues that needs to be addressed. And a lot of times we do run into those problems when you could be stepping on my toe. You don't even realize it, or sometimes they do. Sometimes people just don't, like we talk about everybody when we talk about equality, some people just don't want to be oppressed, but they don't mind oppressing others, or they don't mind other people being oppressed, and so you
Hmm.
can run into that type of situation, you know um but we just have to be mindful if we are talking about moving forward. But before I forget, it was something on this council culture, over cancel culture, that I was thinking about, something you talked about with do we want to just cancel people and want them to disappear or something? I think it's not even meant to, it's not meant to like rehabilitate. Even when we look at the prison industrial system, they're not in there trying to correct. At first, more of them used to be called like correctional facilities. Even if they're
Hmm.
still called that now, they're not rehabilitating the people who are in there, for whatever reason they're in there. But we already know what's up with that. We already know that whole system is just we know what it's for. It's just slavery all over again. But um,
Hmm.
when we're in this type of conversation and we want to reach a certain point, we can't just be cutting each other off. You have to like understand, well, do I want them? Do I want to continue this relationship? Do I want this relationship to improve?
Yeah.
What are the steps I need to take, to maintain that? When we even in romantic relationships, we'll get fed up with somebody, and that's why some of us, it's so easy to like just move on to somebody else, which I've been there before. Sometimes I'll admit I've been in situations where I'm like, you know what, I'm done with this, I'm tired, I'm move on, and sometimes that needs to happen, but sometimes we can
Right.
actually learn to effectively communicate to remedy that situation. Is not always like and I think sometimes that comes from ego of like, well, it's my way or the highway, or I
Hmm.
mean, it's a lot of different things, a lot of different factors that can go
Everything
into
everything isn't a deal breaker, right? But there
it.
are
Right.
certain things that are. And so, but you
Hmm.
have to set your own standards. You have to set
Exactly.
your standards of what's a deal breaker. And I'm talking about in advocacy as well. When you
Hmm.
are engaged in these debates, right? There's a time that you say, all right, I'm going to say this, this, and this. Now, if I get this response and then my final response, if I get another response, then I have to move on from that and just let that one go and move
Yeah.
on to the people who are progressive enough to go in the direction that I'm going. I can't take them. The thing is, you don't just want quantity, you want quality people. Because
True.
sometimes when you have just a large number of people, you find yourself dragging people and they're more of a liability than an asset. You don't want to just be dragging people along just to have numbers.
Mm.
You need quality people who are going to be just as essential and bring something to the table. So, like I said, sometimes you got to move on from people who aren't, but they're not ready yet. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
that they'll never be ready, right?
Right.
Who knows? The door will be open whenever they're ready to come in. And,
Hmm.
the points have been presented in a way that, weren't meant to attack them. Because just because you present it in a way that's acceptable doesn't mean that even those people will understand how to take it. My
Yeah.
point in saying that is just make sure that nothing can fall back on you, because that's our problem with a lot of these woke people.
Hmm.
Even in the conscious community, sometimes the way we talk to people will turn them away because they feel berated or they feel like you're talking down to them, so they
Yep.
don't want to listen to you. Doesn't
Exactly.
mean that if you change the way you talk, you're going to catch everybody, because some
Yeah.
people just aren't meant to listen to you. Like, I had to learn that when I was teaching in high school. There were certain students that just clung to me, but certain students didn't want to hear the message from me. So I was
Hmm.
like, okay, that means I'm not supposed to be their mentor. That means
Right.
I can't teach,
Somebody else can.
but I will
Mm-hmm.
find somebody else that can reach them, that speaks more to them, that they relate closer to. But that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't take anything away from who I am, just because
Right.
I am not that person's choice, right? It
And
doesn't matter. That's why you need
mhm.
more options.
Right. And that's what we tend to do when we're throwing people away, when we're canceling them, is like, well, they're not a good leader because they don't reach you, because you didn't receive their message. A lot of other people can, and they do. And that's why you see, even when people, I'll throw out like somebody like Sean King, right? Um, and you see him, his presence on social media or wherever, and him advocating, for all these different issues. Um, and he's always present, and he brings a lot of good information to people. But then there are some people who don't find him acceptable. They find him to appear to be phony, or whatever. And it's like, why are you trying to cancel this man when he is helping people? He is like, any call out any leader. You can some people don't like the way Tamika Mallory might speak, and they'll want to cancel her. They'll say, whatever about her personality or the way she delivers a message. And why can't you just move on, scroll on? And especially when we're talking about social media, you have the power to do this. You can do that. You can move on, you can unfollow, you can whatever you need to do for your peace. But canceling each other because it doesn't work for you, because you're not receiving their message the way you would like to, we have to stop that. You like, we're not saying like, okay, well, this person is bad for us because XYZ. Like, you're saying you don't like the way that they convey the message, or you didn't like something about them, and so you want to cancel the entire person. You can't. First of all, you don't have the power to do that. I don't know who you thought you were, but you don't even have the power to do that. Who are you to cancel me?
And a lot of the times we love to build people up just to tear them down,
Exactly,
which is why
exactly.
I want to make sure that this platform is always seen as a dialogue, as
Hmm.
a place to learn how to model these conversations so that they remain healthy, because we have to have the difficult discussions. There are troubles in our community. There are internal struggles as well as external factors that we are dealing with. And it doesn't mean that when we are talking about police injustice of killing us, that we ignore what's happening in our own communities, or the violence that we are enacting on each other, right? So when we're talking about white people being racist, it doesn't mean that we can't talk about the internalized sexism that's happening. All these different
Yeah.
things, all these different nuances. There are things external and internal. There are, threats, foreign and domestic, right?
Hmm.
That we all have to deal with, and we have to deal with them concurrently,
Hmm.
because none of this is happening in a vacuum. We have to be
Right.
able to address them, but we have to be able to address them in a healthy way. We have to be able to understand how to converse with one another, how to have a dialogue, how to get to a place where, okay, I'm sitting here, I'm listening to it, I'm feeling daggers, and it hurts to receive this information, but I have to be strong enough to take it because I want to better myself. I want to
Hmm.
be a better representation of myself for my community. I want to be aid. I want to be an asset and not a liability. And that's
Hmm.
what the mindset we have to get to on all sides of this. Any last
Absolutely.
words?
Oh yeah, I wanted to say, I'll end with challenging people to reflect on what you've been taught, reflect on what things that you learned at any point in your life. And it might be something that your family have been doing for generations, but has it worked for them? Does it work for you? And
Mhm.
like, as we spoke to, like, certain toxic ideas, about people, do we want to let that remain instead of challenging it and creating something defining for yourself, to then be able to have those conversations with other people, or improve those relationships with other people? If I have these ideas of, oh, a woman only belongs in this space or in this role, can you challenge that to accept a woman in a different role now. Just something as simple as that. Challenge the old ideas, old traditions. And it doesn't mean that you're dismissing or throwing away your grandparents or your parents or whoever, taught you. It might have worked for them, or they may have been misinformed, but if it's something that's going to be harmful, you have the right to challenge it and to change it for yourself. You can start a new tradition. You can be the new author of your book. So
Yep.
that's why I'll end with that.
And I agree. We have to make sure that we check our own privilege. We have to be aware of it. And, just because you have privilege, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a negative thing. You can use that to be an advocate, to enter the room, to be that voice of the people who cannot voice their own opinions, but be of service to somebody who may not have that same privilege as you do. And that goes for everybody down the spectrum. And have nuanced conversations, search for context, talk to, don't talk at, And so, as we always do, we close the show with the Actualizing African Unity Initiative, letting you guys know that we are a full nonprofit organization doing work, and there are tangible ways that you can get involved with the work that we're doing here in the U.S., on the continent of Africa, in the Caribbean, in South America. We have projects that are currently going on right now that you guys can be involved financially, with your energy, with your, volunteer service, and just with your promotion. So continue to tune in to ASAP, the Afrikan Social Activism Playbook, as we present you with the different plays from the past and how we can still utilize those today. Michelee, let the people know where they can find you.
You can find me at Michelee the Maker, or on social media, or mishmashworld.com, and on mishmashworld.com, on my website, personal website. And that's about it.
If you want more information about African Unity Initiative, visit our website. It's all over your screen right now. And if you want to follow us on social media, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, it's all at African Unity. And we hope to see you guys here for another edition of The Value, A Woman's Worth Volume 2 tomorrow. We are keeping this thing going for the rest of this week. It's so much to talk about, so many nuances. We love you guys. Peace.